Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Women of Inspiration Testimonies. My name is Tammy, and I've got Ash with me today, and we'll talk to her a little bit just now. I just want to say that it's really lovely to have her with us, and I think it's our fourth testimony for the year. So I think that's good going, considering we're only in March. I just want to remind everybody that Women of Inspiration is a platform on Facebook, and we have a group for ladies. And what we really want to do is inspire the ladies just to be who God created them to be. It's about identity. There's a lot of guides on the group. It's been established as a social learning group. So there are areas where you can actually go and get information around Women of Inspiration. The topics that we cover, it's a new group. It started this year, but it's gaining momentum. And I encourage you to visit the page, join the page, because there's going to be a lot of good stuff coming on there. So we're going to be talking about the spirit man. Currently, we have a series on biblical womanhood where we're covering the woman in the Bible, which has been really awesome. And there's a lot of topics there: marriage, parenting. We've got some ladies inspiring others. And so we just want to build a community where ladies can feel safe, where ladies can grow, and where it's a place to share. And so it actually was birthed out of the Women of Inspiration testimonies because I work in the field of trauma. Some of you may or may not know that. And I just realized that women need a lot of support. They don't always have what they need out there. Other women that have been through the same situations can understand what they need. And so this platform is really just tailored for support. So having said that, today Ash is going to share her inspirational testimony with us. And I'm sure you'll be blessed and encouraged. So I know Ash's parents, they're very dear to me. But I'll have to be honest and say I've met quite a few of her family members, but I haven't actually met her. I've seen her in passing at church. I used to be under the church covering. And I heard her testimony on one of their live streams, and it touched me so, and it just stayed with me. So I thought, I'm going to reach out for her to share with us today. So Ash's name is Foss. We're just going to call her Ash. Over to you. Share just a little bit first about what you do.
Thank you so much for having me and for the opportunity, Tammy. I really appreciate it. So at the moment, I have a little online shop called Kitchen Club with K's. And I sell online in and around South Africa, just kitchen-related items, goodies for the bride, pantry, that sort of thing. So it's a bit of a step out for me. My background is in retail and marketing, but it's going well.
So what got you into that? Was it just a passion that you've got?
I'm very passionate about eating and also then somewhat passionate about making food. But when lockdown happened, and you'll hear about it when I share my testimony, but my husband and I had to isolate completely for 5 months. And one of the things that we really missed the most was time with the family around the lunch table or dinner table. And there's just something about sharing food that's so much more than eating a meal. There's something deeper. And so, I guess just loving to eat, loving to share food with loved ones. That was the inspiration.
That's awesome. Yeah. And so what I'll do is at the end of the video, I'll put a little slide there where they can see what you do and where they can get your goodies. And we hope some ladies will follow you. Yeah, very interesting concept. Okay, so Ash, having said that, you're welcome to share your testimony with us.
Cool. So it's difficult to know when to start, because I think for many of us, there's years worth of God's goodness and testimonies and things to talk about. But in chatting with you around it and the testimony that I had shared online through the last live stream, I thought I'd narrow it down to the last 2 years, because that'll be quite a short testimony to share. But it's something that's very important to me and that continues to affect me at the moment. So I live in Cape Town, South Africa, really beautiful place. if anybody who's watching hasn't been, you should definitely come and visit us. When lockdown happened, it happened in March sometime, I think towards the end of March in 2020. And at that time, I had been working for 5 years for 2 Harley-Davidson dealerships as a marketing manager and brand ambassador. And I was very happy in my job, loved the job, loved the bikes. And I was also happily married to the love of my life, Mark, who also, and this is a story for another day, but he's also my boss, which made things a bit complicated. So when lockdown began, it was kind of a two-sided coin, because while I was really happy and kind of flourishing in my career, on the other side of the coin, I was actually also really burnt out and had, I guess, become very distracted from my God-given purpose in walking with the Lord. And it's not, I mean, I was still having quiet times and things like that, but a lot of lifestyle changes had crept in over the years while working for the brand. Nobody's fault but my own. That distracted me. I was probably, I guess, before the end of 2019 when I stopped drinking, probably, drinking too much. Alcohol is actually never a good idea. I always say there's pros and cons to drinking. If you drink, there's pros and cons, but if you don't drink, there's absolutely no cons. There's only pros. And just being, I guess, really busy. I was working, by the time lockdown hit, I was working a minimum of 6 days a week, but often 7 days a week, and an enormous amount of overtime. And in the years leading up to lockdown, I had traveled quite a bit for work, but my husband was traveling extensively for work, both locally and overseas. And it got to a point when they said, okay, it's going to be a 3-week lockdown, that I thought to myself, I actually felt really guilty because I was so relieved. I needed a break so badly, but I'm one of those people that is like lists and goals and admin and do this and all about the hustle and the grind. So that had become so much of my identity that it was tough for me to admit when lockdown started that I was actually so relieved. And the other pro of lockdown was that I was actually going to be able to spend some quality time with my husband, because up until that point, I wouldn't say it was quality time at work together. I think he was so afraid of showing me any type of favoritism that he swung in the opposite direction and was really hard on me at work.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So, it was a strange position to be in when lockdown started. But just before that, at the end of 2019, to give you some background, my hubby had a drug-resistant type of pneumonia, which had progressed quite seriously before they really pinpointed the medication that he needed and diagnosed him correctly. So he had been hospitalized. And before that, obviously, I've mentioned the drinking. He was a very, very heavy drinker. But I'll just make sure everyone understands he was not abusive in any way. I mean, I've seen him drink a whole bottle of Jack Daniels and you couldn't even tell that he was drunk. But his health was deteriorating. He was really drinking himself to death. In a very stressful environment. He was very stressed about work. So when he got that pneumonia, he said to me, like, he felt the Lord had given him a way out to stop drinking. Because in our work environment, it's a very social environment, bikers, and there's always drinking. And I know that unless he had like nothing short of a legitimate medical reason to stop drinking, the pressure would have been so much from just customers and friends. No, man, just have a drink, So the Lord began to work in his life there, and by default in mine as well. So we had stopped drinking at November 2019. So fast forward again to lockdown, and I thought, okay, whatever this is, I really want to use the time to get closer to God and just kind of de-stress from the level of work and, just never really spending that quality time with the Lord. So what happened is during that time, my hubby has kids with his ex-wife, and they came to stay with us as well, which was in itself also a really great opportunity, because with us both working so much, we didn't get to spend a lot of quality time with them. They were with us in the evening after school a couple of times a week, but it's not really, you watch maybe a bit of TV and then everyone goes to bed. So I really saw the Lord beginning to work in there in changing our circumstances and allowing us to have that quality time, and obviously being in lockdown. So I wouldn't say it was without frustrations, but during this time, once he'd had pneumonia and been treated for it, his cough never fully went away. It wasn't bad anymore, but the doctors have said, obviously, his lungs are going to take some time to heal. And so during this time, his cough progressed a little, and I began to get a real burden for him in my spirit. I would say it really came to its peak in about April of 2020. And I could tell that something was wrong. So he started to cough a lot more. He was very fatigued. The kids and him and I would go outside to do some stretches in the morning. He would struggle to stretch, and he began to have these nosebleeds. And I understood and felt that something was very, very wrong. And I began to actually cry to the Lord and ask him for help. So my husband would fall asleep, and then I'd lie there just pillow over my face, just sobbing and saying, Lord, what is it? Is it cancer? That was, I guess, my main thought. Or is it something else? I could feel that something was very wrong. So it got to a point, I think it was in May, where he got a whole bunch of burst blood vessels on his legs. And he was like, no, don't worry about it. It's just a rash. I can see it's not a rash. I could see it was burst blood vessels. But he was so concerned about going to hospital in the middle of a pandemic where, cases are skyrocketing and exposure is such a dangerous thing. After he had pneumonia, his lungs were damaged. It's a respiratory, a large part of it is being a respiratory illness. So we understood that if he wasn't careful, COVID could easily take him out. And so he just did not want to go to hospital. He was like, oh, we'll wait for this pandemic. In hindsight, we'll wait for this pandemic to be over in a month.
Yeah.
So, as I said, he had blood spots on his legs, and he had another really bad nosebleed, and I just absolutely broke down in tears, and I begged him. I said to him, this isn't a joke. He needs to go to hospital for my sanity, because if he's not dying, I might just kill him if he doesn't go to hospital. So, yeah. Those of you who are married, men can be stubborn, but he agreed. So he drove himself to hospital, and just, I'd say about an hour or two, and I got a phone call from him. And I still thought, oh, that's odd that he's phoning me from hospital. Maybe he's been readmitted for something or whatever. And he started the conversation by saying, Ash, I'm really sorry that I have to tell you this. And then, my heart just dropped, and I knew, I had known all along that something was wrong, but when those words came out, I thought, help me, Lord. And he said, I've got leukemia, and it's really advanced. So for me, I didn't know anything about leukemia at that stage, but for me, I understood that leukemia is cancer, and I've had quite a few family members pass away from cancer and people that I've known. And so for me, it was immediately like cancer, death sentence. Yeah. And I just felt fear welling up inside of me enormously, but also at the same time, funny enough, faith, because who else am I going to ask for help but God? So I felt fear, I felt faith, I felt dread, but also hope. And it was a confused time. And I think just in hindsight, it's such a shock when you hear something like that. And, he's the love of my life. So just thinking about the possibility of losing him, I guess, really triggered a thought process that would come out later throughout his treatment that would reveal to me the level of fear that had been operating in my life, basically my whole life long. So he was diagnosed, he phoned me, he told me, and also it was so advanced that the doctor said to him, if he had have waited another week, he would have died, because the blood spots, the nosebleeds, he was actually, he was hemorrhaging internally. His white blood cell count was so low. So he said to me, look, they are immediately going to transfer him to the hematology unit at Kales River Netcare, which is also a cancer ward that deals with blood cancers. And so I had to quickly pack him a bag, take him from the hospital, and immediately take him through to Kales River to begin chemo. They weren't even going to wait a day. So as I mentioned, fear coming up. This was now the start of 5 months of complete isolation for us, because we couldn't risk him coming into contact with COVID in any way, shape, or form, not only because he still had damage in his lungs, but also with chemo, it completely destroys your immune system. Yeah. So it's, number one, it's hard enough to look after somebody who's going through that, but it's another when that person is also a germaphobe and really paranoid about sickness, which my husband, if somebody was sick at work and they had like one little cough, he'd be like, go home, you got to infect us. So just feeling that responsibility. So yeah, with him being such a germaphobe, I just felt such a level of responsibility to care for him in a way where he would feel comfortable and safe, which in itself also kind of adds to the responsibility of looking after somebody like that. And then also in the middle of a global pandemic. So it was a tough time, but also a time of a lot of reflection and talking to the Lord. So during this 5-month period, I think I saw my family, and when I say my family, I mean my mom, my dad, my sister, I think twice briefly for an hour or two, and that was only when his stints in hospital were longer than 14 days, because it meant I could quickly see them for an hour or two and then isolate for 14 days before he came home. So everything was really planned and structured, but it was particularly tough on him not being able to see his children. And I thank God for video calls and technology, because, being away from everybody like that is so tough. Also during that time, I mean, we couldn't have anybody come into our house or anything. So I was also so paranoid about germs. I felt, because of my personality type, I guess, and the fear that I began to struggle with, my overwhelming thought often was that, what if he dies because there's a germ in the house that I didn't clean? And like he gets sick and he dies, because even like a little cold, or so I'm pumping vitamin C, eating really healthy, and we don't have like a huge house. It's a 1-story house, but it is a 3-bedroom house with a swimming pool and stuff. So it's a fair size. And I just began this journey for 5 months of dusting, vacuuming, mopping every second day, which is so much. And then also what happened was, with his chemo, he became what they call neutropenic. So it's where like your stomach lining becomes so thin from the chemo that if you ingest something that's not like cooked properly or has germ on the skin or whatever, it can make you really, really ill. Wow. So we switched over to glass chopping boards. And so, like if I wanted to make him avo on toast, I'd make the toast and then I'd boil the kettle, pour it over the glass chopping board, disinfect the knife, wash the avo with Dettol soap.
It must have been so stressful just in itself. Wow.
Yeah. When I spoke to the doctor, she's like, you don't have to go that extreme. But I knew it would also give him peace of mind, and it would also give me peace of mind. And I think in some way it was also just me trying to take control of the situation. So, where you have like faith, like, oh God, I trust you, but I'm really going to clean like crazy.
I'm going to be prepared on this side.
Yes, I'm going to do my part 200%. Yes. So, it's tough, because also I have in my life been always thinking that certain things were just my personality. So I'm just a controlling person, or I'm just always want to put my best foot forward because I've got good work ethic. But in reality, that need to control actually just stemmed from fear of not having control of an outcome, fear of bad things happening, fear of it's going to be my fault, because I'm also somebody who naturally is really hard on myself. So trying to prevent anything bad from happening so that I don't sit with that guilt and regret. And, just having this good work ethic and always want to put my best foot forward is also just fear of people not liking me and fear of what people think of me. And so the Lord has taken me on such a journey. When Mark was first diagnosed with leukemia, I embarked immediately on a 3-day fast to petition God. And I said to him, is Mark going to make it? I just need to know, because I have faith in God that he can heal Mark, but I didn't have faith that he would. There's a difference. That's where you see the difference between faith and hope. I hoped that he would heal Mark, but I didn't really have the faith for it. And he didn't tell me. Sometimes God is the strong silent type.
Yes, that's right. We want the answers, but they're not coming.
Exactly. Yeah. So I kept saying to the Lord, because during this 5-month period, there was also a time of knowing whether or not to move forward in certain areas, or like stupid things. Our anniversary was in the May. So I thought to myself, I knew all the things that I wanted to buy for him to spoil him. But it was like, do I spend all that money and buy all those things? What if he dies? I mean, I've got no use for them. Is it going to be a waste? But the Lord also began to minister to me during that time about how the Bible says we need to run our race. And it doesn't say like, run your race until you're unsure of something and then hold back and check out the landscape, We also had renovations done on our house in the December of 2020. And it was a toss-up of, is he going to survive? Or are we still going to be in the house? Do we outlay all this money for these renovations? And I think the enemy uses fear and struggle to keep us bound in a place where we say, okay, well, because we don't know what the outcome is going to be, we're not going to do anything. But like, I don't regret any money that was spent. In hindsight is a beautiful thing, but when you're going through it, it's really tough.
Yeah.
So during this 5-month period, that first 3-day fast was the first of quite a few. And I mean, as you know, I love to eat, love to cook. So fasting is not a fun thing for me. But I was really petitioning the Lord, firstly for Mark's life, but also during this time where he was revealing to me about how fear had taken root in my life, just fasting to really try and break that stronghold. Because I said to the Lord, I don't know how to not be this way. I don't know how to not be anxious and paranoid and trying to think of every outcome. And I'm also I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Clifton Strengths Finder, but I rank top in every single area for strategy. So I'm like, if you want to know the quickest, most easy, whatever to do anything, I'm your girl. Like, I'm a strategic thinker. And that's tough if you're trying to let go of control and let the Lord have his way, And I remember also when Mark first phoned me to tell me he had leukemia, I said to the Lord, I don't want to trust you if he's not going to make it. Like, I want to trust you, but I don't want to trust you if he's not going to make it. If it means not trusting you and I can do something in my own strength to make it happen, then I'm going to do something in my own strength to make it happen, And just having walked that walk over such a long period of time and the Lord dealing with me about that, it's become such a revelation to me. And I've also understood, we can do everything that we can to accept healing and to pursue healing of ourselves and changing of our core issues and our core personality traits when they are not helpful. But it's really only by the power of the Holy Spirit that you truly get freedom, because nobody, including myself, could have unwound me from that position of fear and anxiety and the need to control, especially in a circumstance like that, other than God. There's no way. So that was a very interesting journey. So during this time where God wasn't telling me if Mark was going to make it or not, we had the privilege, the absolute privilege of having this death sentence hanging over our heads. And I call it a privilege, not lightly, but because, I think for a lot of people, when they lose a loved one, it's instant. And they have things that they shouldn't have said, or they have things that they had left unsaid, or whatever issues they hadn't wrapped up. And I think regret is a burden that is so heavy to bear. And you always hear people saying, live each day as though it's your last. And that's easier said than done, because if I knew for sure that today was my last day on earth, I promise you I wouldn't watch series tonight. I'd be doing something else. But I can tell you right now that my plan is to watch series tonight. When you don't have this death sentence kind of hanging over your head, it's easy to become, I guess, flippant about life. So during this time, we had the privilege of not becoming flippant about it. Every day it was like, is he going to make it? Isn't he? And he had many close calls. And so we went through a period of never missing an opportunity to say, I love you to each other, of making things right, of getting both of our affairs in order, just because it was such a wake-up call to us, prioritizing family. And I remember him saying to me when he was diagnosed, I think maybe, when you get a terrible diagnosis, sometimes you can get into a position of wanting to bargain with God. And I think
It's
on
part
some
of the
level,
grief cycle, hey?
yes, yes. So I think on some level, maybe he wanted to bargain a little bit with God. But for the most part, I think it was just such a wake-up call that he knew and decided how he wanted to live his life from there on out. And he knew God had really shaken him up, because he always jokes, because he was raised in a Christian family, but he took the long way around to come back to God. So he had lived a very unsaved life in between. And so during this time, he said to me, look, there's things that are going to change. We're not going to watch anything with a 13 age restriction or over. That's it. We're done with swearing, with that type of talk, with feeding our minds and emotions with, sexual content and violent content. True crime channel off.
Feeding the soul, hey?
Yes, yes. And so that he wanted to become a more present father to his kids. We wanted to spend more time with family. He wanted to start having regular quiet times, and then also being in church every Sunday. And so he began to do as much of that as he could from the position that he was in. So we would stream church, because obviously we were isolating, we couldn't go out. So we would live stream church every Sunday morning, video call our family, various family members, probably even more than once a week, maybe like every second day. He started to have regular quiet times, and I really saw the Lord stirring up inside of him this like inquisitiveness around the things of God. And it's such a beautiful thing to watch, and such a privilege to watch him have this time of grace in order to make good on the promises that he's now said, look, this is how I'm going to live. So it was really a time of death hanging over us, but it's spurring us on to good things. And I think it can do one of two things. It can either spur you on to good things, or it can bind you in a position of fear or of anger and resentment at God. Why is this happening to me? But I thank the Lord, neither of us kind of had those thoughts. We just thought, wow, what grace, So we saw lots of miracles during this time as well. I guess it's those miracles that build your faith. So where before I'd said, God, is he going to make it or isn't he? I began to be able to say, wow, he almost died here. Thank you so much. Now I'll give you like one example. He phoned me one day, and he was really shaken up from the hospital. And he said to me, he felt like he had almost died. His blood sugar had shot right up, I think it was 15 or something. And his blood pressure had dropped dangerously low. And he said to me, and I remember his voice was still shaking. He said to me, and I just managed to reach that button in time, because when I came to, the nurses and doctors were there, reviving me, or whatever it is that they do. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. But I still thought, oh my gosh, like God must have a plan for him, because he could have gone at that point. And the funny thing is, after he had come out of hospital for a while, I had taken him back for more treatment. I used to drop and fetch him. And a nurse came to him and said to me, you gave us such a fright, and it's such a miracle that you're here. And he was like, yeah, no, my blood sugar, my blood pressure. She's like, no, the circumstances around it. And he was like, oh, okay, well, what do you mean? And she was actually a nurse in a different ward. And she had come down to have lunch with his nurse, who's a friend of hers, in the hematology ward. And when she came down, his nurse was manning like the front desk. It's a long sealed off passage, and all the rooms are sealed off because it's all cancer patients and germs and stuff. And she walked in, and she saw two men at the end of the passage by his room. And she said to him, like, what are those two guys doing in here? It's not visiting hours. There's two of them, which wasn't allowed during COVID. You were allowed one person sometimes. And his nurse said, what do you mean? I've been here the whole time. There's nobody in here. And she's like, I just saw two guys. And so his nurse went to go and look, and she discovered him crashed there and completely out of it. And that's when she called the other nurses and the doctors to come in and bring him back. So he hadn't actually managed to press the button. He thought he had, because the last thing he remembered was reaching for it. And so the nurse said to him, and she's a Christian, and she said, I can only think that I saw two angels.
Yes, wow.
Yeah, and so what would have happened if she hadn't? So when stuff like that happens, and that was one of a few things, you begin to think, okay, God, he's going to make it. You've got a plan for his life. And so your faith grows, and his faith grew a lot through that as well. Another miracle was that when they were looking for stem cell donors, because he needed to do a stem cell transplant, His sister was 100% match, his older sister. And that is like unheard of, to get 100% match. So lots and lots of miracles. And he had a successful stem cell transplant on his birthday, his 50th birthday, on the 8th of September. So, just him getting the transplant on his birthday, there were so many things that I could see God like weaving and working in our circumstances. And then in January, he went into full remission from cancer. So they can't tell you that you're cured from cancer because, lawsuits and stuff if it comes back. Yes. But basically being in full remission means cured from cancer. And, I really rejoiced in that because I saw so much of God's goodness. The specific leukemia that he had normally only affects young children. So it's very unusual for him to have had it. And also for him to be at a point so close to death and then come back completely from it is just an absolute miracle. January, full remission, so stoked. And what happened is during this time, because of all these miracles and really just drawing close to God, him and I both began to dream and to hope. And that's a really interesting concept that unless you've walked this path, I think is difficult to truly grasp. Like we had ordered a map of Takealot eventually towards the end of the year, and we put it up and we put little pins in places that if, God willing, we'd be able to travel together. I've never been overseas. So he really wanted, like his heart's desire was for us to go to Italy. He had been before, he loved it. And so for us to have bought a map and thought about even traveling in the future, that's like a big step from cancer diagnosis, death, doom.
To life.
Yes, to hoping and dreaming, but during this time, and especially after his full remission diagnosis, that cough, that persistent cough was back. And I got that disturbed feeling in my spirit again, where I was deeply concerned that something was very wrong. So I spoke to his doctors, and I'm not the one to like interfere. They are the professionals, and I completely respect that. I've done some marketing, I'm not a medical professional, but I knew that something was wrong, that they weren't picking up on it. And I even got them to allow me twice to go into his consultations with the doctors, which actually wasn't really allowed in COVID, but I accompanied him. I said to them, something's wrong, and I'm telling you, he downplays it because he's a man. Mind you, men normally play up their sicknesses, but he was so like, it's just...
Unless it's something that they don't want to face.
Yes, which I think could have been the case, that old familiar cough. So I said to them, something's very wrong. And they did lung scans and they said, no, it's fine. What happened is with the stem cell transplant, the new tissue that is now growing and stuff, it's just causing a bit of an irritation. And that's what's causing the cough. But it got to a point where I, once again, was pushed to an absolute breakdown in tears. And I took him to the hospital to be checked in at emergency. And I said, they have to find out what's wrong. Like, I will not accept what they're telling me. Something's not right. And his oxygen was only at 80%. And that's really, really dangerously low. And then they discovered actually he had 2 types of pneumonia that he had contracted, because when you get a stem cell transplant, your immune system grows as though you were a little baby. In fact, a year after your transplant, you have to get all your vaccinations again. I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about like measles and...
Your baby vaccination.
Yes, your baby vaccination. Wow. So you are literally, your immune system is a baby in an adult body. So he had 2 types of pneumonia, and I'll spare you the sad details, but basically they intubated him, put him into a coma, and he passed away on the 12th of April. So 2021. And that,
wow.
A person could say, like, why? Why did God do all those miracles only to let him die? But I really don't see it like that. And I really believe that God gave us an extra almost year of grace to do everything we wanted to do, to pursue God, to come into a place of right standing with him. And I see so much grace in that. I really think God actually gave us extra time. With or without God, Mark would have died. But God saw fit to spare us and to allow this diagnosis to really bear fruit in our lives. And so when I was with him, and before he was intubated, and I think it was 2 days when he was intubated, just saying to him, everything's going to be okay. And I was so obviously sad and heartbroken, but just having this overwhelming sense of God's mercy and thinking, like, who am I? Because I'm not a good person or a perfect person, even with all these, pursuing God. Who am I that God would have seen fit to allow me to marry this incredible man and to walk him home into eternity? That is such a privilege.
Wow.
And I talk about him without crying. It's been almost a year since he passed, and there's been a lot of crying in between. But the one thing that moves me without fail is to think, like, God allowed me to walk him home into eternity. And that is such a privilege. And not just that, but I think of his death as like a seed being planted, and it's borne so much fruit in my life, just being set free from fear and moving into a position where I'm pursuing God. I've had a real wake-up call to pursue him wholeheartedly. And I just think, even in his death, there's so much beautiful fruit coming from it. And that in itself, what more could one hope for? I mean, I don't know if you think about dying, which is a bit morbid, like, do you want a big funeral? Do you want lots of people to be sad? And I think no. But when I die, if that could bear fruit in somebody else's life and their life bears fruit and so on, what a legacy, what a privilege, what a beautiful concept. And I guess that has really sustained me. And so I can say without fail and without hesitation that God has always been good to me. And the circumstances may not look like it. The circumstances may think like, oh, why didn't God tell you he was going to die? Well, I probably would have cried him into eternity. I probably wouldn't have spent the money. I probably wouldn't have dreamed and hoped and planned. And all of those things are important for us. We need, God gives us a future and a hope. Without hope and without planning and dreaming and moving and doing things, we perish. So it's so important to continue to run, even if you are scared and you don't know the outcome of things. We've got to do things anyway, and I feel so passionately about that.
Yeah, and I think you would have missed out on a lot of beautiful moments if the focus was on he's going to die and what am I going to do? And you got into that place of depression or into that pit. You wouldn't have enjoyed him. You wouldn't have enjoyed the time together, the planning,
100%.
all those things that actually brought life versus death.
Yes. Definitely, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that you shared that at the end, that God just helped, you were with him as he entered eternity, because I was listening to you telling your story, and in the back of my head, I'm just like, there's this confidence about you and there's this strength about you. And I'm thinking this must have been super, super hard for you. I mean, you're still quite young as well to lose a husband. And I was just thinking, there's something here, there's a key here for others to grab hold of. And I know there was obviously a lot of sad stuff in between and sad times.
Yeah.
But I can really hear in the way you're expressing yourself and just in the way you're carrying yourself that there's been this revelation, of that. It's really incredible.
Do you know what it is? And I think, like, I've thought about it, and I was a person so bound in fear in every element of my life that it had just become characteristics of me. And when Mark was diagnosed and I said to the Lord, I don't want to trust you if he's going to die. To me, that in that moment, that was like the worst thing that could happen. It was the most immediate threat, and it was the biggest threat, because I've lost friends in my life. I've lost family members. In fact, 2 months before my grandfather passed away. But this for me was like, when it's the love of your life and your husband and the person you're building a life with, and you've been so busy, you haven't really enjoyed each other. And now suddenly you have this time together. When the thing I feared the most came upon me and happened, and I discovered I was okay, it stripped everything away. And I realized I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. There is grace portioned for me. His mercies are new every morning. And I can say that without a shadow of a doubt in my mind. And so now when anything scary comes along and I think like, oh gosh, you know, what am I going to do financially? Kitchen Club is not making me a millionaire. You know, what does my future hold? I'm actually in such a strange season. It almost feels like between seasons, like the house is on the market, the estate isn't wrapped up, I don't have a proper income, and there's all these things. And I think the worst that could happen has happened.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, you know, I was thinking, you know, when you said, you know, it's okay, I don't have to be afraid. I thought, well, what is the worst thing that can really happen? You know, is losing that person that's part of your life, you know, that other part of you, you know?
Yes. Yeah. And so when the thing that you feared the most comes upon you and you realize that you're okay, it kind of makes something rise up in me that makes me want to fight. I'm like, oh, really? You try to take me out, devil?
Yeah, come and get me.
Let's see. Yeah. Now I'm like, actually, and the person to be feared the most is the person who has nothing to lose. And I've come to a place where, though I do have things to lose, my family particularly is very dear to me and stuff. In the same breath, I have nothing to lose because they're actually God's. They're not mine. Nothing in this world is actually mine. And so you get to this place of stewardship instead of ownership. And it gives you a beautiful detachment to think, you know, if my house burned down tonight, I'd care, but a part of me doesn't care. A part of me wants to fight and be like, you've tried again, you know. And I don't know, this thing is up in me and I feel so passionate about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can definitely see that even in that journey, like I'm thinking of those two guys that were seen outside of his room, like they were these angels there. It's almost like Mark was this angel that came into your life to bring you onto a better path along with him, because there was a plan and a purpose for your life too. And if that was a momentary season for you, for God to show you something, for God to take away that fear, or to even bring you into a place. So I think of even Kitchen Club, where you were in a job where you were burnt out and you were happy, but you weren't really happy, you know, that kind of thing. And you run your identity on your work, what you think you're capable of. And I was just thinking of what you were speaking about, the strategy, that you had strategy for everything, you know, but our natural strategy, the strategy we have in the natural, never works for the spiritual stuff. It gives us discipline for the spiritual stuff, and I think it gives us a better insight. And I think that's also key to your gifting, you know, and part of the assignment that God has for you, because I mean that's quite an awesome thing to have, a strategy. You know, God's kingdom needs people that can strategize as well against the enemy, you know. So that was awesome. And then just, you know, what he brought out of that, it's like, you know, the creativity in you, and the fact that you could start that Kitchen Club, you know, it's like he brought you onto a new path almost through that, having that relationship in your life. And even though there was grief and there was loss, there came this incredible growth out of it. You know, it's like post-traumatic growth. We get the post-traumatic stress, but this post-traumatic growth came out of it, where you actually now have like almost like a new lease on life. Even though you don't have that person with you, its life has opened up in a different way for you.
Yes. Yeah, his life and death has completely changed my life. And that's like where God says he works all things together for good. And that is something I've really seen God be faithful to his word. And so if you don't understand God's word, you see also something else that has happened to me is I've began to understand that though it's great to have specific scriptures to stand on, it's not everything. The Bible is a whole truth. And so when Mark was diagnosed, I also really began to study what the Bible says about healing. And I could not find any part or place in the Bible where somebody asked Jesus to heal them and he didn't. And, you know, even the Great Commission and stuff, and it's like, heal the sick. It doesn't say heal the sick unless whatever. But that's also a dangerous place to be in, because the Bible also says our days were written in the book. In his book, our days, they were written for us, which means there's a beginning and an end. If God did always heal people, there'd be people 1,000 years old on the earth. So it's also about understanding, and I'm not doing apologetics for God here, but it's also understanding that sometimes God's plan, his truth, his word doesn't always look the way we picture it or we think it's going to. So where God says that there's grace and that whoever believes in Jesus will be saved and stuff, I've seen all of that come true in Mark's life. And he was healed of cancer, but he wasn't healed of pneumonia. But that doesn't make God a liar. We have to develop our understanding and get to a place of maturity in God where we understand that trials happen. The Bible also says you're going to face trials and tribulations. It says many times that life is not easy. You look at the apostles being stoned, and I don't mean with weed, actual stones, and shipwrecked and hated. And, it wasn't like, I've met Jesus, I've been under his teaching, I'm never experiencing anything bad ever again. There's a whole truth to be learned, and it's about taking the parts that apply in your season and really standing on it and trusting God,
Yeah, I just think you're incredibly brave to have gone through this, because my husband also had cancer about 2 years ago. It was just a lymph cancer. So I totally identify with the fact that they're stubborn and don't want to go to the doctor, because he started with a tiny lump. Yeah. And I still was visiting him in Thailand where I was working at the time. And I said, what's going on here? And he says, oh, no, it's just a little lump. And I was like, okay. He had a little bit of a sniffle. So I thought, okay, it's just a... Then he phones me and he says, this is getting bigger. And I said, you got to check that out. You can't just leave it. So by the time he came home the December for the holiday, it was about this big. And it was sticking out in his neck. And he still refused to go to the doctor. He was still convinced it's just going to go away. So I also dragged him to the doctor and diagnosed with cancer, and he had to go through that to remove it, and radiation and all of that. But why I just add to that, to your story, is because I know that incident, I can't see why that happened. His family's got cancer, but it's more the colon cancer, rectal cancer, got nothing to do with the neck. It's an oral pharyngeal cancer. But what happened through that was that it brought us to a place in our life where we've been living apart for about 14 years. He working in Abu Dhabi and I'm in South Africa in Cape Town, and we've been traveling back and forth. And some years we didn't even see each other, maybe once a year, because, I was busy or he was busy. And it actually got to a point where there was this, should I come back? Shouldn't I come back? And then when that happened, I said, okay, well, Lord, if this is you telling me that, okay, it's time for us to be together because life is short, then you got to give me a confirmation, because I was adamant I'm not coming back to Abu Dhabi. This is not where I want to be. And so with his recovery and, him just needing care, because it still took a time for him to recover, the radiation also depletes them. I said, okay, I'm going to take care of my husband. I'm going to go back with him. And I had a green light. And so being back here for about 3 years, and it's been hard. It's not been easy. Like, I'm sure it wasn't easy for you afterwards to kind of find your feet, because I had a good life in Cape Town. I had my church, my people, everybody was there. And so it was a big transition. But God's done incredible things in the time that I've been here. In my own life, like he did with you, he's stripped a lot of stuff away. He's dealt with a lot of stuff that I needed dealing with. I've received a lot of healing, just even in a marriage, being apart for so long. So there's such incredible things that came out of it, the Lions Arise platform, and then, recently this platform. And it's like, God says, I'm not going to give you all the answers, because this was also my question for him was, if I go, what then? Because my identity was also wrapped up in the life I had, the practice, my church, the ministry. And it was like, okay, I've got to now give this all up. Kind of probably like you with your work during COVID and that sort of thing. Yeah. And you almost have to redefine now who you are in this new space.
Completely.
And sometimes that's exactly where God wants us to be, to redefine the parameters of our life and bring it back
Yes.
into, I always say, back into alignment with His blueprint for our life.
Yes.
What is it that I want you to do, not what you want to run with? But maybe I have a better plan for you. So,
yes.
I just listen to your story, and, I can really resonate with that. And I know it hasn't been easy, for you. And the fact that you're just sharing your testimony today is incredible. And I know it's going to bless a lot of ladies. And what I want to ask you is, so just for those that are grieving or have sort of experienced what you have, what did you do afterwards? What was your grieving process? How did you cope with that?
So I actually think that my grieving process started when he was diagnosed, because it was always a case throughout the journey of he might die. And so I had time to get rid of denial and bargaining and come to a place of surrender. And that's, I think, the grieving process had started. And then when he died, I didn't have to still try and bargain or be in denial. So I'm fortunate in that regard.
Okay.
But I just cried, man. And I felt the feels. But my dad said something. He was the one who took or hosted my husband's memorial. And he said, grief is, it's good to grieve and you go through grief, but don't set up camp there. And I've watched how grief can also be debilitating if you set up camp there. So there's a time where you cry, and then there's a time when you dry your eyes and you look up again and you carry on. And I think, I don't think there's a perfect way to grieve, actually. And I think for everyone, it's so different.
It's unique for everybody, hey?
But you can't avoid it. And I hate crying. I hate emotion. I don't watch romantic movies or feely, heartfelt movies. I'm like, please spare me the drama. I watch movies to escape reality. I've had enough drama and crying and pain in my life. But you have to go through it. You have to experience it, but just hold on to God. I mean, it hasn't been a perfect grieving process for me. It's not like I'm some shining example of how to do it right. I'm not. There's been times where I've really struggled, and there's been the temptation to, pick up a bottle of wine and drown my sorrows and like a million other things, It hasn't been easy. And I was on sleeping pills for a while to help me sleep. The doctor prescribed them for me. It hasn't been a stress-free journey, but if you hold on to God, He's faithful and He will bring you through it. But it's messy. You can't avoid that.
That's right, yeah. So coming out of that miry clay, He says that He'll put your feet on solid ground. But it's like you still got to come out of the clay and get your feet out and then on the solid ground so that you can walk firmly again with Him.
And it's a process. Like grieving is a journey. It's not like, okay, it's been a year, now I'm done. Like there's times where I go through, and I try not to do it often. Like if I see a photo of him or whatever, I'm fine. But sometimes I'll really miss him, and then I've got a photo album on my phone of him, and I'll look through all the photos and really get in my feels and cry. And you have to allow yourself.
Healing.
It is. And then dry your eyes, look up again, and carry on.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I've watched testimonies. I'll just share this in closing. Of people that have been to heaven, and they say there's such a celebration in heaven when somebody comes home. It's like this huge celebration, and the person themselves that's come home actually is watching their ceremony, whatever the memorial or the burial. They're actually watching it to see, what are the responses. And this one lady shared, and she said, make jokes. They are happy in heaven. They want to hear the funny stuff about their life. This is her experience, and make it a happy occasion. So like when you said just now, when you die, what would you want? I said to my husband after watching a couple of these, I said, please, when I die, please just have a big party. Like just be happy. Definitely. I'm graduating, we're graduating to we're not going anywhere, we're not disappearing, we're just graduating.
Yes.
And, one day we'll see all our loved ones. I know that doesn't make the pain better, but that is the truth of it.
It is the truth. So one of Mark's family members, who was very close to him, was saying to me that they had said to God, "Oh, please give me some assurance that Mark made it to heaven." And it got me thinking, for those who know that their loved one didn't go to heaven, maybe they were like just, for whatever reason, flat out refused to follow God, believe in him or whatever. But I think it's also, and it sounds cold and harsh and very practical, even though it's a sensitive matter, is that once that person's gone, there's absolutely nothing you can do to change it. Mm-hmm. So it's part of the grieving process is accepting that. And I said to him, look, I'm pretty sure that Mark went to heaven. I mean, he was really pursuing God. And I saw that deep, intimately as we lived together, But only God actually knows. And I just think it's in God's hands, and he's the righteous judge, and we can trust him. We don't always understand God, but we can always trust him. And I guess, I don't know why I added that, but I think
maybe that's the nugget you want to leave, because that was going to be my question. What sort of inspiration or encouragement would you like to leave for the ladies today?
Definitely that we don't always understand God, but we can trust him. For sure. He's the righteous judge. He knows us through and through. He knows our loved ones. He understands our circumstances. If we trust him and pursue him, he's faithful to be found by us.
Yeah. Amen. Well, thank you so much, Ash. I really enjoyed this. I loved your story, and I know that it's going to encourage others. And thank you so much for making time today to be with us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.